Welcome to the Celestial Saga channel. What happens when old enemies are forced to live and study together? Today you will see how one student was able to change the dynamics of intergalactic coexistence and overcome the confrontation that could have divided the Academy forever. Don't miss this incredible story of struggle, friendship, and unity. That was the perfect moment for Ethan. He swiftly ducked beneath the support beam and unleashed a powerful kick, striking it with all his might. The metal bar hummed with a sharp vibration, and as Drakkar passed beneath it, it collided with the back of his head, knocking him off balance. Drakkar lurched forward, crashing hard into the lockers with a loud crash. But Ethan wasn't done yet. As Drakkar struggled to regain his footing, Ethan seized his fallen opponent's arm, wrenched it behind his back, and used the force to slam Drakkar into the lockers once more, this time with greater intensity. "Give up, Drakkar!" Ethan growled through clenched teeth, holding on tightly as the Virexian writhed in his grip. "You're not going to win this." The galaxy had not seen such widespread devastation in millennia. The Virexian Wars, as they were now known, had torn through entire star systems, leaving lasting scars that would take generations to heal. What had started as a clash of ideologies and cultures between the Terrans and the Virexians escalated into a full-scale war, drawing allies and enemies from across the galaxy. The Sci-Fi, an ancient and wise race, held off on taking sides for as long as they could, but even they were eventually forced to enter the fray. When the dust finally settled, a fragile peace emerged. The Virexians, once proud and unyielding, had no choice but to reconsider their unyielding traditions, realizing that their refusal to change had nearly led to their extinction. The Terrans, who had fought with unmatched bravery and innovation, emerged from the conflict as a new force to be reckoned with, earning both respect and fear from those who had once underestimated them. The Sci-Fi, with their long lives and deep wisdom, played a pivotal role in brokering the peace, reminding all parties of the critical importance of cooperation and mutual understanding. In the wake of the war, a new era began, one defined by the careful blending of former enemies and allies. A central symbol of this integration was the creation of joint educational institutions, where young members of the Terran, Virexian, and Sci-Fi species could study together. These schools weren't just about academics. They were meant to nurture a new generation of leaders capable of bridging the gaps between their peoples. Yet the path to unity was far from smooth. Old resentments and deeply ingrained prejudices simmered beneath the surface, creating a tension that constantly threatened to unravel the delicate peace. The schools themselves became microcosms of the galaxy, where alliances were tested and conflicts often erupted despite the best efforts of the educators and administrators. Ethan stood at the edge of the Academy's expansive courtyard, his emotions a mix of excitement and unease. This was the day he had been working toward ever since the announcement that Terran families would now be allowed to send their children to the newly integrated academies for Ethan's family. It was a momentous occasion. Both of his parents had served in the war, his father as a strategist and his mother as a medic. They had witnessed the horrors of the conflict firsthand and worked tirelessly to help build the peace that followed. Sending Ethan to this academy was their way of investing in a brighter future, one where the next generation might avoid the mistakes of the past. But even though Ethan understood the significance of the opportunity, a deep sense of dread still lingered. The stories he had heard about the academy were unsettling, of Soranite students towering over their classmates, their imposing forms casting long shadows through the hallways, of Virexians, small and nimble, using their agility to create chaos, and of Terrans who often struggled to fit in among such a diverse and often intimidating group. His parents had tried to reassure him, reminding him of the importance of bravery and adaptability. "You're a Terran," his father had said, giving him a comforting pat on the back. "We've always been quick to adapt, quick to learn. You'll find your place." Still, as the time to enter the academy drew closer, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to step into a world far more complicated and challenging than he had ever imagined. The thought of meeting students from species he had only read about in history books was thrilling, but the fear of being singled out, of not fitting in, was overpowering. Luckily, Ethan wasn't facing this daunting journey alone. For years, he had been working on a personal project. An exceptionally intelligent AI named Orion. Orion wasn't just a tool. It was a companion, the result of countless hours spent coding, testing, and refining embedded in a discrete earpiece. Orion was designed to offer real-time information, tactical guidance, and emotional support. It could tap into the Academy's database, calculate probabilities, and even predict potential social interactions based on Ethan's inputs. "Orion, you there?" Ethan whispered, hesitating before the gates. "Always, Ethan," came the confident reply, soft but clear in his ear. "Ready to face the unknown?" "Ready as I'll ever be," Ethan muttered, taking a deep breath. "Remember, we've run through every scenario," Orion reminded him. "You've got this. If you need anything, just think it, and I'll be there." The gates swung open, revealing the sprawling campus beyond the architecture, designed to meet the needs of all three species. Blended Terran practicality, Phyrexian efficiency, and Serenite grandeur students of all shapes and sizes milled about, some in groups, others on their own, all carrying the same nervous energy that accompanied the start of any school year. Ethan paused for a moment before stepping through the gates. This marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for the galaxy at large. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ethan was determined to make his parents proud, to show that he could succeed in this new era of unity. With one final glance back at the gates, Ethan stepped forward, Orion offering quiet encouragement in his ear, ready for whatever the Academy had in store. The Academy was everything Ethan had imagined, and even more. As he walked through the massive gates, the size of the place overwhelmed him. The buildings were towering and majestic, a perfect blend of architectural styles from all three species, creating a campus that felt both strange and familiar. The Academy's walls were decorated with intricate carvings, some unmistakably Terran in design, while others showcased the flowing organic shapes of Serenite art or the sharp geometric lines of Phyrexian craftsmanship. The halls were just as impressive, wide enough to fit even the largest Serenite, filled with students from all three species. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors, thundering steps from the Serenite and the quicker, lighter movements of the Phyrexians. Ethan couldn't help but feel tiny as he maneuvered through the crowd of students. The Serenite, towering above everyone else, moved with a slow, deliberate grace, their presence commanding respect. However, it didn't take long for Ethan to notice something else about them. They weren't just slow in movement, they were also slow mentally. Their conversations dragged on, with their thoughts taking what felt like forever to fully form. Despite their impressive size and strength, there was a simplicity in the way they interacted, a certain blankness in their eyes that made Ethan wonder how they could keep up with the complexities of the curriculum. The Phyrexians, in stark contrast, were the complete opposite. They zipped around quickly, their multifaceted eyes constantly scanning for opportunities to cause chaos. Quick-witted and sharp, the Phyrexians seemed to thrive on unpredictability, their behavior erratic and impulsive. Ethan's heart raced as he tried to absorb everything around him. He had read about the Serenite and Phyrexians, of course, but seeing them in person was a whole different experience. The Serenite were even larger than he had imagined, their thick, scaly skin catching the light with every movement. Each step they took seemed to resonate through the floor, reminding Ethan of their immense power. But despite their physical dominance, Ethan couldn't help noticing how slowly they processed their surroundings, as if the world itself moved at a different speed for them. As he made his way through the halls, Ethan felt like a stranger, surrounded by beings who were nothing like him. He was used to being around other Terrans, but here in this place, he was just one among many species, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and social codes. He couldn't help but wonder how he would fit in, or if he even could. "Orion," Ethan whispered as he passed a particularly imposing Serenite. "Any tips?" "Stay calm," Orion responded, his voice steady in Ethan's ear. "Remember, everyone here is just as new as you are. Observe, learn, and adapt. You've got this." Despite Orion's comforting words, Ethan still couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. As he continued through the corridors, he had his first real interactions with other students. A group of Serenite passed by, their massive forms casting long shadows across the floor. One of them nodded toward Ethan, a gesture he wasn't sure how to interpret. Was it a greeting, an acknowledgement, or something more? Ethan returned the nod, hoping he had responded correctly. A bit further down the hall, a group of Phyrexians had gathered near a set of lockers, clicking and hissing to each other in their native language. As Ethan approached, they fell silent, their multifaceted eyes locking onto him. He could feel their gazes on him as he passed, but he kept his head down, focusing on the map of the school displayed on his tablet. Best to avoid them for now, Orion advised. Phyrexians can be unpredictable, especially in groups. Ethan quickened his pace, agreeing silently. He had heard all the stories about the Phyrexians and their tendency to stir up trouble, and the last thing he wanted on his first day was to make them his target. Despite the unease gnawing at him, Ethan eventually found his way to his first class without further incident, but the discomfort never fully left. The hallways were quieter as he made his way to his next class. He'd taken a different route, hoping to avoid drawing attention, especially from Drakkar and his gang. But it seemed like fate had other plans. As he turned a corner, Ethan found himself face to face with Drakkar, flanked by two of his cronies, their mandibles clicking ominously. Well, what do we have here?" Drakkar hissed, a twisted grin spreading across his face. His multifaceted eyes gleamed with mischief. "The brave little Terran who thinks he's smarter than us." Ethan's heart thudded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Remember what Dad said," he thought to himself. "Stay calm, be smart, don't show fear." "What do you want, Drakkar?" Ethan asked, his voice steady, even as fear crept into his stomach. Drakkar took a step closer, towering over Ethan. "I want to see what you're really made of," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "You think you can just walk around here acting like you belong, like you're better than us?" "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Ethan replied, his mind racing as he quickly assessed the situation. He scanned his surroundings, noting the narrowness of the hallway and the distance to the nearest exit. Though he wasn't thinking about running, he was already planning his next move. The two Phyrexians on either side of Drakkar began clicking and hissing, their tone mocking. "But Terran's scared," one taunted, moving closer. "I can smell it." Ethan's grip tightened on his tablet. He had been preparing for this moment. He'd designed a small device capable of emitting a high-pitched frequency unbearable to Phyrexians. It was a risky move, but he couldn't see another option. "Orion," Ethan murmured under his breath, knowing the AI would hear him. "Get ready to activate the device." "Understood, Ethan," Orion replied with a calm, measured tone, his focus unwavering. Drakkar's laughter filled the air, mistaking Ethan's quiet mutter for a sign of weakness. "What's the matter?" Drakkar taunted. "Got nothing to say, Terran?" Ethan took a slow, deliberate breath and forced himself to meet the Phyrexian's intense stare. "Oh, I've got plenty to say," he said, his voice steady. "But I believe actions speak louder than words." Without hesitation, Ethan let his tablet slip from his hands, the device hitting the floor with a loud crash. The sudden sound grabbed the attention of the Phyrexians, exactly as Ethan had planned. "What are you?" Drakkar started, but his words were cut short by a sharp, ear-splitting noise that filled the hallway. Ethan had activated the device. The impact was immediate. Drakkar and his cronies recoiled, their mandibles snapping in discomfort as they gripped their heads. The frequency, too high for them to endure, disrupted their senses. They staggered, momentarily stunned. Instead of running, Ethan remained where he stood. He crossed his arms and observed calmly as Drakkar tried to regain control. The Phyrexian leader's expression was a mixture of anger and pain, but Ethan didn't flinch. He knew that showing any fear now would only provoke them further. After what seemed like an eternity, Drakkar finally recovered, his mandibles clicking furiously. His gaze was filled with fury, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Respect, begrudging though it was. "You think you're clever, Terran?" Drakkar spat, still recovering from the sound. "This isn't over." "Maybe not," Ethan replied, unfazed. "But I'm not afraid of you, Drakkar. If you try this again, you'll see just how clever I can really be." The Phyrexians, still dazed, turned their eyes to Drakkar for guidance. Drakkar hesitated briefly before nodding curtly. "Let's go," he muttered, signaling for them to follow. The three Phyrexians turned and slunk off down the hallway, their pride visibly wounded. Once they disappeared around the corner, Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He bent down to retrieve his tablet, deactivating the device and allowing the hallway to return to its quiet state. "You handled that well," Orion said, his voice calm and reassuring. "Standing your ground was the right call." "Thanks, Orion," Ethan replied, his voice steady, but the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "I guess we'll find out if it was enough." A week passed since the incident with Drakkar, and to Ethan's surprise, everything had been quiet. almost unnervingly, so Drakkar and his gang hadn't made any moves against him, and there was no sign of retaliation. Ethan allowed himself to breathe a little easier, but he knew better than to drop his guard. Drakkar wasn't the type to let a defeat go unpunished. Sure enough, as the new week began, Ethan found himself face to face with Drakkar once more. This time, however, the Virexian didn't waste any time with words. It was during one of the longer breaks between classes, when the hallways were mostly empty. Ethan had found a quiet corner of the academy to review his notes when he heard the unmistakable clicking and hissing behind him. He turned to find Drakkar and his cronies approaching, their mandibles snapping with menace. "So, the Terran thinks he can outsmart me and then run and hide." Drakkar's voice was low, cold, and dangerous. "You've had your fun, Ethan, but it ends today." Ethan stood slowly, his mind already racing through potential outcomes. He knew this wouldn't be like the last time Drakkar was seeking revenge, and this time he wouldn't settle for mere intimidation. "Back for more, Drakkar?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice calm. "I thought you'd learned your lesson," Drakkar sneered, stepping closer with purpose. "You got lucky once. This time I'm not holding back." With surprising speed, Drakkar lunged at Ethan, his arms reaching out with force. But Ethan had anticipated this. He sidestepped just in time, feeling the rush of air as Drakkar's strike missed by inches. "Orion?" Ethan murmured, his movements fluid as he dodged yet another attack. "Any ideas?" "Use your surroundings," Orion advised quickly. "You're faster and more agile. Keep moving and make sure you don't get trapped." Ethan nodded subtly, putting the plan into action. The hallway was narrow, but there were enough obstacles, lockers, benches, and pillars, that he could use to his advantage. As Drakkar charged again, Ethan slipped behind a row of lockers, forcing the bulky Virexian to slow down and navigate around them. "You can't hide forever, Terran," Drakkar growled, but Ethan was already moving again. He darted from one side of the hallway to the other, using the pillars as cover while he plotted his next move. As Drakkar swung at him again, Ethan spotted his chance. A support beam ahead was low enough that even a Virexian would need to duck slightly to pass under it. If Ethan timed it just right, he could use this to his advantage. "Orion, when I give the signal, distract him with an alert on his communicator," Ethan whispered, positioning himself. "Understood," Orion replied, poised to carry out the plan. Drakkar, growing more frustrated by Ethan's evasive tactics, charged again, mandibles clicking angrily. But just as he closed in, his communicator beeped loudly, flashing a bright red warning light. Distracted for the briefest moment, Drakkar glanced down at the device. That was all the opening Ethan needed. He ducked under the support beam and delivered a powerful kick, sending it vibrating as Drakkar passed beneath it. The metal bar struck the back of his head, knocking him off balance. Drakkar stumbled forward, crashing into the lockers with a resounding crash. But Ethan wasn't finished yet. As Drakkar struggled to regain his balance, Ethan grabbed the fallen Virexian by the arm, twisting it behind his back and using the momentum to slam Drakkar into the lockers again, this time with more force. "Give up, Drakkar," Ethan hissed through clenched teeth, maintaining a firm hold on the writhing Virexian. "You're not winning this." Drakkar let out an enraged hiss, but Ethan stood firm, using all his strength to keep the larger Virexian pinned in place. The struggle was fierce, and Ethan could feel the burn in his muscles, but he refused to back down. He knew he had to end this fight now. Slowly, Drakkar's resistance began to falter. The initial burst of anger had drained him, leaving him struggling to break free from Ethan's grip. But Ethan wasn't going to let him escape. With one last push, he forced Drakkar to the ground, holding him there until the Virexian stopped resisting. "Enough," Drakkar spat, his voice a mix of pain and frustration. "Enough, Terran." Ethan cautiously released him, stepping back but staying alert, prepared for any further attacks. However, Drakkar didn't move. He lay there for a moment, breathing heavily, before sitting up and glaring at Ethan. "You've made your point," Drakkar grumbled bitterly, rubbing the back of his head where the beam had struck him. "But this isn't over." Ethan shook his head, a feeling of exhaustion mixed with relief washing over him. "It's over, Drakkar. If you come at me again, I'll do worse than this." For a long moment, they locked eyes, neither willing to back down. Then finally, Drakkar's gaze faltered, his anger starting to wane, though his pride was clearly bruised. "Fine," he muttered, rising to his feet. "You win this round, Terran, but watch your back." "Same goes for you," Ethan replied, standing tall despite the ache in his muscles. Maybe next time we can try something other than fighting. Drakkar snorted, but there was a trace of reluctant respect in his eyes. We'll see. With that, Drakkar turned and walked off, his cronies trailing behind him, leaving Ethan alone in the hallway. As the adrenaline faded, Ethan leaned against the lockers, exhaling deeply. "Thanks for the help, Orion," he said quietly. "You did well," Orion replied, his tone warm with approval. "You've shown Drakkar that you're not someone to be messed with." "Let's hope he got the message," Ethan muttered, pushing himself off the lockers. He was tired, sore, but ultimately satisfied Drakkar wouldn't be bothering him again, at least not if he had any sense. With a final glance down the empty hallway, Ethan walked away, head held high. He had won, not just with physical strength, but through strategy, agility, and intellect. That victory meant more to him than any fight ever could. The days after Ethan's confrontation with Drakkar had brought a noticeable shift in the atmosphere around the academy. News of his victory spread quickly, and wherever Ethan went, there were whispers of respect, admiration, and even awe. His status had changed. He was no longer just another Terran student, but someone who had proven he could stand up to the academy's toughest challenges. As Ethan moved through the hallways, he began noticing something he hadn't fully appreciated before: the Soranite students. They were physically imposing, towering over everyone else with their deliberate movements, but it became clear that their strength didn't extend to every area of their lives at the academy. In class, they struggled to keep up, their slower minds making it difficult for them to grasp complex concepts as quickly as the others. Socially, they were isolated, often misunderstood or overlooked by their peers. One day after class, Ethan noticed a Soranite named Theron lingering behind as the others left. Theron was larger than most. With dark green scales that shimmered under the classroom lights, he was staring at his datapad, brow furrowed in frustration. "Hey, Theron," Ethan called out, walking over to him. "Everything okay?" Theron looked up slowly, blinking as he processed the question. "Struggling," he rumbled, his voice deep and slow. "This calculation doesn't make sense." Ethan glanced at the datapad and quickly understood the problem. The calculation was part of an advanced physics problem, challenging for anyone but particularly difficult for a Soranite, whose mind worked at a slower pace. "Mind if I help?" Ethan offered, pulling up a chair next to Theron. Theron hesitated, his large eyes shifting between Ethan and the datapad before slowly nodding and handing it over. "Thank you," Theron said, his voice laced with a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. For the next hour, Ethan patiently worked with Theron, breaking down each step of the problem. He took his time, explaining each part clearly and slowly, ensuring Theron understood before moving on. It was a challenge, requiring Ethan to rethink how he approached the material, but the relief on Theron's face as he began to grasp the concepts was worth it. "See, it's all about breaking it into smaller steps," Ethan explained, demonstrating how to approach the problem in a way that suited Theron's slower, more deliberate pace. Theron's eyes lit up as understanding dawned on him. "You make it clear," he said, "easier to follow." Word quickly spread among the Soranite students. They had always respected Ethan for his strength and bravery, but now they saw him as someone who genuinely cared about helping others, even those often overlooked. Before long, other Soranites began seeking Ethan's help, each with their own academic struggles. Soon, Ethan found himself tutoring several Soranite students, guiding them through challenging subjects like math, science, and even social studies. It was hard work, requiring both patience and creativity, but Ethan found it rewarding. He enjoyed seeing the moment of realization on their faces when something finally clicked, and he valued the opportunity to make a real difference in their lives. One afternoon, after helping a Soranite named Call with an essay, Ethan noticed a group of Terran students nearby, whispering to each other. They were eyeing him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "What's he doing helping them?" one of them muttered. "They won't get it anyway." Ethan felt a surge of irritation but kept his response calm. "They're trying, and that's what matters. Everyone learns at their own pace." The Terran shrugged, unconvinced, but didn't press the issue. Ethan could tell that his decision to help the Soranite students wasn't popular with everyone, but it didn't matter. He knew he was doing the right thing. As the weeks passed, Ethan's relationship with the Soranite students grew stronger. They began to see him not just as a tutor, but as a leader, a person they could trust and depend on. Whenever someone spoke ill of Ethan or tried to challenge him, the Soranite would step in, using their size and strength to shield him from trouble. One day, as Ethan walked to class, Theron fell in step beside him. The Soronite moved slowly, but there was a newfound confidence in his stride. "You are a good leader, Ethan," Theron said, his voice filled with sincerity. "We appreciate what you do." Ethan smiled, feeling a swell of pride for the friendships he had built. "Thanks, Theron. I'm just glad I can help." "You do more than help," Theron replied, placing a large, reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You make us better." Ethan nodded, grateful for the support of his Soronite friends. In a place as challenging as the Academy, having allies, especially ones as loyal and strong as the Soronite, was invaluable. With their support, Ethan felt more confident than ever he had earned the respect of his peers, not through brute force alone, but by genuinely caring about others and putting in the effort to help them succeed. And as the school year continued, Ethan knew his loyalty and dedication would be crucial in the challenges that lay ahead. The confrontation with Drakkar had shifted the dynamics of the school in ways Ethan hadn't fully anticipated. While his victory had cemented his status among the Terrans and earned him the loyalty of the Soronite, it had also had an unexpected effect on some of the Virexians. Not all of them agreed with Drakkar's methods of dominance through intimidation, and Ethan's refusal to back down had given them pause. One afternoon, while Ethan was working in the library, he noticed a group of Virexians nearby. They weren't the usual troublemakers. These Virexians were quieter, more reserved, and appeared to be struggling with their studies. They kept to themselves, occasionally whispering in their native clicking language, but their frustration was clear. Ethan watched them for a moment, considering his options. His past experience with Drakkar had shown him that not all Virexians were the same, and perhaps these ones simply needed a different kind of support. After all, he had helped the Soronite, so why not try with the Virexians as well? "Orion," Ethan whispered, leaning slightly closer to his earpiece. "What do you think? They seem to be struggling with their work." "It could be an opportunity to reach out and offer help," Orion replied softly. "But be careful. Virexians value pride, and they might not respond well to an offer of assistance." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Appreciating the advice, he approached the group slowly, making sure not to appear threatening or overbearing. The Virexians noticed him and fell silent, their multifaceted eyes watching him warily. "Hey," Ethan said, offering a small, friendly smile. "I noticed you guys seem to be having a tough time with your work. I've dealt with assignments like these before. Mind if I help?" The Virexians exchanged glances, their mandibles clicking softly as they communicated among themselves. Finally, one of them, a smaller Virexian with deep blue markings, spoke up. "Why would you help us, Terran?" she asked, her tone more curious than hostile. Ethan shrugged, keeping his tone light and nonchalant. "Why not? We're all here to get through this place, right? Maybe we can help each other." The Virexians seemed to consider this for a moment. The leader of the group, a slightly larger Virexian with a cautious look, finally nodded. "We could use the help," he admitted, his voice low. "These calculations, they don't come easily." Ethan sat down with them, pulling out his tablet and reviewing the assignments they were struggling with. The calculations were challenging, but not beyond his ability with some focus. As he began explaining the concepts, Ethan noticed that the Virexians were unusually attentive. They weren't slow learners. They simply processed information differently, much like the Soronite, but in their own way. As the session continued, Ethan observed that the Virexians began to relax, their initial wariness fading, as they realized he wasn't there to judge or belittle them. He was simply there to help, and they appreciated it. "You explained clearly," the leader of the group said after a while, his tone respectful. "We didn't expect this from a Terran." Ethan smiled, leaning back in his chair. "I think we all have more in common than we realize. It's just about finding the right way to communicate." Over the next few days, Ethan continued to spend time with the Virexians, assisting them with their studies and getting to know them better. He discovered that many of them were just as frustrated with Drakkar's aggressive tactics as he was, but they felt powerless to oppose him. "I know Drakkar gives your species a bad reputation," Ethan said one afternoon, as he and a group of Virexians worked through an assignment in the courtyard. "But that doesn't mean you have to follow his lead. You can be strong in your own way." One of the Virexians, a smaller one named Nika, looked up from her work, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "You think we can change things?" she asked, her voice a blend of hope and uncertainty. "I do," Ethan answered firmly. "But it takes effort. It's not about being the loudest or toughest. It's about being smart, working together, and showing everyone what you're truly capable of. Nika and the others seemed to take his words to heart. Over the following weeks, Ethan noticed a shift in their behavior. They started standing up for themselves, not through aggression, but by excelling in their studies and contributing thoughtfully in class discussions. They stopped lingering in the background and began asserting themselves, earning respect instead of instilling fear. One day, as Ethan walked through the halls, he overheard two Terran students talking. "Did you hear about the Virexians in our math class?" One of them asked. "They've really stepped up lately." "Yeah, I heard Ethan has been helping them out," the other replied. "Seems like they're not so bad after all." Ethan smiled to himself, feeling a sense of pride. Changing the status quo had never been easy, but he was proud of the Virexians' progress. They were proving that with the right support, they could achieve more than anyone had expected. As the school year continued, Ethan's bond with the Virexians deepened. They began to view him not just as a mentor, but as an ally, someone who understood their struggles and stood by them. In return, they offered their loyalty, ready to defend him as he had defended them. Ethan knew the journey wasn't over, but with the support of the Soranai, the Virexians, and his fellow Terrans, he felt more confident than ever that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The months after Ethan's victory over Drakkar brought a new sense of order to the academy. With the Soranai's backing and the unexpected alliance with some Virexians, Ethan had become a respected figure among the students. He had proven himself as a leader, capable of uniting students across species boundaries. Yet, despite his success, a subtle tension lingered. Something Ethan couldn't quite shake. Drakkar had been strangely silent since their last confrontation. He hadn't confronted Ethan again, and for a while it seemed like he had accepted his defeat. But Ethan knew better than to let his guard down. Drakkar wasn't the type to give up that easily. And there was something about the way he and his remaining followers moved that suggested the calm was only temporary. As the school year wore on, Ethan began to notice subtle shifts in Drakkar's behavior. The Virexian leader no longer stalked the halls with overt aggression, but a coldness had replaced his usual arrogance. Whenever their paths crossed, Drakkar's eyes lingered on Ethan, filled with burning resentment that was impossible to miss. "Orion," Ethan asked one day as he walked to class, "have you noticed anything unusual about Drakkar lately?" "Indeed," Orion replied cautiously. "Drakkar has been more reclusive, but I've observed increased activity among his remaining followers. They've been meeting more frequently in secluded areas of the academy. It's subtle, but they're definitely regrouping." Ethan frowned, considering the implications. "Do you think he's planning something?" "It's possible," Orion replied. "While Drakkar hasn't made any direct moves against you, the pattern suggests he may be gathering support for a final confrontation." The thought of another clash with Drakkar made Ethan uneasy, but he knew it was inevitable. Drakkar's pride had been deeply wounded, and the only way he would be satisfied was by reclaiming his lost dominance. As the weeks went by, the tension in the air grew heavier. Ethan started noticing small, seemingly unrelated incidents that, when pieced together, painted a troubling picture. There were rumors of Virexians gathering early in the morning before classes, whispers of secret meetings taking place in the hidden corners of the academy, and a general sense of unease that seemed to hang over the student body. One afternoon, while walking through the courtyard, Ethan saw Drakkar standing with a group of Virexians. They were close together, their mandibles clicking softly as they exchanged words. When Drakkar caught Ethan's eye, he didn't look away. Instead, he held Ethan's gaze with a smirk before turning back to his followers. "I don't like this," Ethan muttered to himself as he walked on, a shiver of unease creeping up his spine. "Stay vigilant, Ethan," Orion advised. "It's clear that Drakkar is planning something. We need to be prepared for whatever he has in mind." Ethan nodded, determined not to let his guard slip. He began to quietly alert his allies, the Soranai and the Virexians he had helped, ensuring they were ready if things escalated. He didn't want to alarm anyone, but he knew he needed their support. As the days passed, the tension around the academy grew more palpable. Even the teachers seemed on edge, though they remained unaware of the unrest simmering within the student body. Then one day, as Ethan made his way to his final class of the afternoon, he received an unexpected message on his tablet. It was a message from one of the Virexians Ethan had helped, a student named Krina. "Be cautious. Ethan, I overheard Drakkar talking. He's planning something big, and it's going to happen soon." He didn't say exactly when, but it's clear he wants to settle the score. Ethan's stomach dropped as he read the message. It was exactly what he had feared, but now there was no denying it. Drakkar was preparing for one final confrontation. Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before it all came to a head. "Looks like the storm's brewing," Ethan murmured. "Yes," Orion replied, his voice calm and resolute. "But remember, you're not facing this alone. You've got allies, strong ones. Whatever Drakkar has planned, we'll face it together." Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He knew these final days would be crucial, and he would need every bit of strength, intelligence, and determination to stand firm. Drakkar's challenge was inevitable, but Ethan was resolved to confront it head-on, understanding that this fight would test not just him, but the bonds he had forged over the course of the year. The end of the school year was fast approaching, and the tension that had been building for weeks finally reached its breaking point. The atmosphere at the academy was thick with anticipation, as if everyone knew something big was about to happen. Ethan had been on edge, keeping a close watch on Drakkar and his followers, but there was little he could do except wait for the inevitable. And then it happened. It was a bright, sunny afternoon, and the central courtyard was bustling with students enjoying the break between classes. Ethan was sitting with a few friends, discussing their plans for the upcoming break, when he noticed the sudden quiet that fell over the courtyard. The usual chatter and laughter had died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. Ethan looked up and saw Drakkar and his followers approaching. There were more of them than usual. A lot more. They moved with purpose. Their eyes locked on Ethan, and it was clear they weren't here for a friendly chat. "Ethan," Orion's voice came through his earpiece. "They're coming for you. Stay calm." Ethan stood up slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the eyes of the other students on him as Drakkar's group closed in, forming a tight circle around him. There was no escape. This was it. The final showdown. "End of the line, Terran," Drakkar hissed, his cruel grin widening. "It's time to settle this once and for all." The crowd that had gathered watched in silence, some faces filled with fear, others with curiosity. Ethan could see the nervous faces of his friends, the Soranai and the Virexians he had helped, but none of them moved. Drakkar's group was large, and it was clear that this wasn't going to be a fair fight. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Ethan," Drakkar growled, his mandibles clicking in anger. "You think you're smarter than us? Stronger? Let's see how you handle this." Without warning, Drakkar lunged at Ethan, and the fight began. Ethan barely had time to react as Drakkar's attack came at him with brutal force. He managed to dodge the first strike, but another Virexian was already coming at him from the side. Ethan blocked the attack with his forearm, but the sheer number of opponents made it impossible to defend against them all. Blow after blow rained down on him as Drakkar's followers swarmed him. Ethan fought back with everything he had, using the agility and strength he had honed over the school year. He ducked and weaved, landing punches and kicks where he could. But for every attacker he pushed back, two more took their place. "Stay focused, Ethan," Orion urged. "Remember your training, use their numbers against them." But even with Orion's guidance, Ethan was struggling. Drakkar was relentless, his attacks fueled by months of simmering resentment. The other Virexians fought with vicious determination, eager to prove their loyalty to their leader. Ethan could feel his strength waning, his movements becoming slower, more desperate. A well-paced punch from one of the Virexians sent Ethan staggering backward, crashing into the fountain at the center of the courtyard. He barely managed to stay on his feet, but the brief moment of disorientation was enough for Drakkar to close in, landing a powerful blow to Ethan's side that sent him sprawling to the ground. The world seemed to blur as Ethan struggled to push himself up, his vision swimming. He could hear the crowd around him, their whispers of doubt and fear cutting through the haze. "He's not going to make it," someone murmured. "He's outnumbered. There's no way he can win this." Ethan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand despite the pain coursing through his body. He couldn't give up now, not after everything he had fought for, everything he had achieved. Drakkar stood over him, a triumphant grin on his face. "This is the end for you, Terran," he sneered, raising his fist for the final blow. But just as Drakkar's fist came down, Ethan found the strength to move. Rolling out of the way at the last second, he pushed himself up, breathing hard, and turned to face his attackers once more. "I'm not done yet," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his limbs. "You might outnumber me, but that doesn't mean you've won." Drakkar's grin faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "You're only delaying the inevitable," he growled. "You're all alone. No one's coming to save you." Ethan's heart sank as he realized Drakkar was right. The students who had gathered to watch weren't moving to help. They were too scared, too unsure of what to do. And as much as Ethan wanted to believe he could take on Drakkar's entire group by himself, the truth was that he was overwhelmed. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, Ethan refused to back down. He raised his fists, ready to fight with everything he had, determined to hold on to the respect he had fought so hard to earn. Just as he braced for what he feared might be the final blow, a shout pierced through the tension in the air. "Leave him alone!" Ethan looked up, surprised, to see Theron, the Soranai he had mentored, charging toward the fray. The towering figure of Theron was soon followed by several other Soranai, their massive forms moving decisively. They quickly positioned themselves around Ethan, creating a protective wall between him and Drakkar's group. "You will not hurt him," Theron rumbled, his voice filled with a quiet, unshakable resolve. Drakkar hesitated, clearly taken aback by the sudden arrival of Ethan's allies. Before he could react, a group of Virexians darted into the fray, their swift movements a stark contrast to the Soranai's steady advance. Among them was Krina, the Virexian princess Ethan had mentored. She led the group with a fierce determination, her multifaceted eyes locking onto Drakkar. "This ends now, Drakkar," Krina hissed, her tone commanding. "You're not the leader you think you are." The sudden shift in numbers caught Drakkar off guard. His usual arrogance faltered as he saw the Soranai blocking his path and the Virexians outmaneuvering his remaining followers. The advantage that had been firmly in his hands just moments ago was now slipping away rapidly. But the surprise didn't stop there. From the edges of the courtyard, Ethan noticed several Terran students, those who had witnessed his strength and compassion, beginning to step forward. They didn't have the raw power of the Soranai or the agility of the Virexians, but they brought their own strengths to the table. Strategy, coordination, and unwavering loyalty to their friend. "Ethan has always had our backs." Maya, one of Ethan's Terran friends, called out as she moved to stand beside him. "Now, it's our turn." The scene that unfolded before Ethan felt almost surreal. Just moments ago, he had been on the verge of defeat, but now he stood surrounded by a united front of students from all three species together. They formed a presence that even Drakkar couldn't ignore. "Stay back, Ethan," Theron said, as he moved forward to block Drakkar's path. "We'll take care of this." "Yeah, you're not fighting alone," Krina added, her voice firm with resolve. "We're with you," Drakkar snarled, clearly furious at this unexpected turn of events. He tried to rally his followers, but their resolve had already started to crumble. Some of them glanced nervously at the united front before them, unsure of how to proceed. "Don't just stand there," Drakkar barked at his group. "Take them down." But the Virexians, and even some of Drakkar's remaining followers, hesitated. They saw the overwhelming support Ethan had garnered, and their confidence wavered slowly. They began to back away, the weight of their decision sinking in seeing his followers falter. Drakkar's fury turned to desperation. With a growl, he lunged at Ethan, but Theron was ready. In one smooth motion, Theron intercepted Drakkar, using his immense strength to shove him back. Meanwhile, Krina and her Virexians moved with precision, exploiting their agility to outmaneuver Drakkar's remaining loyalists. "Enough, Drakkar!" Krina commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You've lost!" Drakkar struggled against Theron's grip, his mandibles clicking in frustration. He knew the battle was lost. His strength was no match for the unity of Ethan and his friends, and the loyalty he once commanded was now shattered. The Virexians and Soranai who had followed him were no longer willing to fight for him. One by one, his followers stepped back, their resolve crumbling. Drakkar, realizing that his cause was hopeless, stopped struggling. He glanced around at the faces of those who had once been loyal to him. Now they were watching from a distance, unwilling to fight for his leadership any longer. The realization hit him hard. He hadn't just lost the fight, he had lost the respect of his peers. With one final bitter glare at Ethan, Drakkar shrugged off Theron's grip and turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in humiliation, and his followers scattered in his wake. As the tension in the courtyard dissipated, Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He'd come so close to losing everything, but in the end it was the bonds he had built with his friends and allies that had saved him. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude, as he looked around at the students who had come to his aid. Theron gave a slow, approving nod. You helped us, Ethan, he said simply. Now, we help you. Krina stepped forward, a small smile tugging at her lips. You've earned our respect, Ethan, she said, and that's something no one can take away from you. The courtyard slowly began to return to normal as students dispersed. But the weight of what had just happened lingered in the air. Ethan knew that this wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for everyone who had chosen to stand together, regardless of their species or differences. As he walked away from the courtyard, surrounded by his friends, Ethan couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. They had faced Drakkar's challenge together, and in doing so, they had proven that unity was stronger than any force that tried to tear them apart.